What if the most famous last stand in American history has been told almost entirely from the side that lost, while the boy who actually survived it was almost never truly heard? On the 25th of June, 1876, a 13-year-old Lakota boy rode into a storm of dust, gunfire, and terrified horses in the valley. His people called Greasy Grass the same place history books remember as the Battle of the Little Bighorn, or Custer's Last Stand. He watched soldiers fall. He took a man's scalp with trembling hands, and he carried away a small, ticking object he didn't understand, a symbol of another world pressing in on his own. For the rest of his life, that day would follow him like a shadow, not only as a victory, but as the moment when the world he knew, the rhythms of land, family, and spirit, began to disappear beneath the weight of a nation moving west. This is not the story of Custer. This is the story of the boy who survived him, and the memory of a people who refused to forget. Before it became a battlefield, Greasy Grass was simply home. Along the winding Little Bighorn River, thousands of Lakota, Northern Cheyenne, and Arapaho families gathered beneath the open sky, drawn together by the hunt, by ceremony, and by a quiet but growing determination not to be forced from their lands. Estimates say 6,000 to 8,000 native people lived in that valley, with more than 1,000 warriors prepared to defend them, facing about 700 U.S. cavalry. For a boy like Black Elk, daily life felt busy but familiar. Women tended the fires, tanning hides and cooking meat and turnips over crackling flames. Children ran between the tipis, learning to carry water, care for the ponies, and listen when the elders spoke. Men rode out to scout, hunt, and trade, returning at night with stories and fresh meat for the camp. The village was carefully organized. Hunkpapa, Oglala, Miniconju, and other Lakota bands camped in long curves along the river, with Cheyenne and Arapaho families nearby. From a distance, it looked peaceful, smoke drifting upward, children splashing in the shallows, herds of ponies grazing along the ridges. But beneath that calm, everyone sensed a change in the wind. Soldiers had already struck other camps. Rumors of more bluecoats whispered from tipi to tipi. And somewhere in that vast sea of lodges, a 13-year-old boy lived his life the way boys always have. Riding horses, swimming in the river, laughing with friends, unaware that within a day, the world he knew would be shattered, and he would carry the hair of a dead man at his belt. For the Lakota, there was no clear border between the everyday and the sacred. The spirit world moved quietly beside them, in work, in hunting, in war, as real as the wind over the plains. The day before the battle, Black Elk was called to join a healing ceremony for a warrior named Rattling Hawk, who had been badly wounded. The medicine man, whose power came from the bear, asked several boys, including Black Elk, to become little bears in the ritual. Their bodies were painted in bright colors of yellow, red, and black. Their hair was tied up to resemble the rounded ears of a bear. Feathers were placed on their heads and even in their mouths as symbols of breath, spirit, and transformation. The medicine man wore a full bearskin and moved on all fours, singing sacred songs that rose and fell like the wind. As the chanting grew stronger and the wounded man struggled to stand, Black Elk suddenly felt as if the earth had dropped away beneath his feet. He remembered an earlier vision, the mighty thunder beings riding across the sky, and a deep chill ran through him. Something terrible was close. That feeling did not leave when the ceremony ended. Even after he washed the paint from his body in the cold water of the river, even as he joined the evening dances beneath the stars, the sense of danger stayed with him, a silent shadow just beyond his sight. He simply did not yet know whether the coming storm would fall upon his people, or upon the soldiers already riding toward them across the plains. The next day began like so many others. Black Elk's father woke him before sunrise and took him into the hills to graze the family's horses. He told him to tie a long rope to one pony so that, if trouble came, they could gather the rest and escape. It felt like simple caution, not a warning of what was about to arrive. By midday, the heat was heavy. The boys led their ponies to the river to cool off. Women dug turnips in the distance. Children splashed in the shallows. For a moment, it seemed the soldiers might not come at all. Then, a cry tore across the valley. "They're coming! The soldiers are charging!" The alarm raced from camp to camp: Hunkpapa, Oglala, Miniconju, Sanzark, Cheyenne. Dust exploded upward as warriors ran for their horses. Women grabbed children and blankets. Men shouted for weapons. In a heartbeat, the calm rhythm of village life disappeared. Black Elk's older brother leapt onto a horse and rode toward the danger. Their father placed a pistol and a treasured six-shooter in Black Elk's hands and sent him after his brother with one instruction: ride hard, give him the guns, then come back alive. Beyond the dust, General George Armstrong Custer had already divided his command. Certain he could strike fast and trap the people in their village, he did not yet know he was riding toward the largest native encampment his scouts had ever seen, a place ready to defend its children. And for Black Elk, the question was no longer whether there would be a battle, but who would survive it. Near a patch of timber, Black Elk and the Hunkpapa warriors hugged the ground as the first shots sliced through the leaves. Troopers on tall horses pushed through the dust, firing down into the trees. A shout cut through the noise: "Be brave! Don't run! The ones who cannot defend themselves are behind us." Then another cry rose like thunder: "Crazy Horse is here!" Only days earlier he had defeated Crook at the Rosebud, and now he rode into the valley with a wave of Lakota and Cheyenne warriors. Dust and black powder smoke swallowed the sky. Horses screamed. Bugles blared. Hooves struck the earth like rolling thunder. Soon the fighting spilled into the river, men and horses colliding in the churning water. Black Elk saw a Lakota warrior grab a soldier's bridle and fall. He saw bodies drifting in the current. Blue coats scattered along the banks. He waded in, too small to reach the front, but unable to look away. When the troopers who tried to break through the village were finally stopped, a Lakota rider urged him to take the scalp of a wounded soldier. The boy's hands shook. The soldier clenched his teeth. Black Elk fired once and took his first scalp. Not far away, Custer's own command was being wiped out almost to the last man. No white soldier survived to tell what happened on that ridge. And in the valley below, a 13-year-old boy began to understand that even victory can stand terrifyingly close to horror. On distant hills, Lakota women and children watched the battle through drifting dust. They lifted their voices in song, sending high, trembling cries into the wind to steady the men below: husbands, brothers, sons, and fathers fighting for their families and their land. When Black Elk reached one of those hills, his mother answered him with a special tremolo meant only for her son, a sound woven from pride, fear, and sorrow. Boys his age and even younger begged him to return to the fighting with them. In most American textbooks, this moment is almost invisible, but in Lakota memory, it matters deeply. Victory did not belong only to great chiefs. It also belonged to ordinary families, including children suddenly swept into war. Later, when they climbed the ridge where Custer's men had made their final stand, the scene felt unreal. Gray cavalry horses lay across the ground. Weapons and gear were scattered everywhere. The Lakota dead had already been carried away because the living cared for their own first. Like many others, Black Elk walked among what remained. From a fallen soldier's belt, he found a small yellow object, a watch. It ticked softly in his hand, then fell silent. He wore it around his neck for a long time before he learned how to make it move again. To him, the watch was more than something taken after battle. It was a tiny metal heart from another world, a world that measured life with schedules and campaigns instead of buffalo migrations, ceremonies, and winter counts. Years later, while the United States turned this fight into the legend of Custer's last stand, Lakota elders remembered something else: the last great victory of a free people defending their families on their own land. The day after the main fighting, the tension didn't fade. Soldiers still held defensive positions nearby, and Lakota and Cheyenne scouts warned that more U.S. troops were moving along the river. War parties tested those lines, trading shots with dug-in soldiers and searching the brush for men hiding in fear. But the leaders already knew what would follow. The army would never forgive this defeat. So that night, the great village broke camp. Tippis came down. Bundles were tied to travois. Families moved quietly through the dark valley, following the river and turning toward the high country near the Bighorn Mountains, where they hoped the soldiers wouldn't follow. For Black Elk, the battle didn't end with the last gunshot. Riding in a pony drag with his younger brothers, he spent the night keeping puppies from climbing out while the column moved in silence. Children slept sitting upright. Men watched the shadows from the edges of the trail. At dawn, they rested beside a dry creek bed and shared meat streaked with fat. But fear still lingered. When warriors later rode in, jokingly wearing captured army uniforms, panic swept the camp before turning into laughter and relief. The victory at the Greasy Grass would soon be followed by hunger, shrinking lands, and the loss of the Black Hills, the sacred heart of Lakota country. And for the 13-year-old boy who survived it, this was only the beginning. We're used to hearing the story of Custer's last stand as if it were a tragic, one-sided tale of heroic defeat. But when you listen to Black Elk, a 13-year-old Lakota boy standing in the river, watching soldiers and his own people fall around him, the picture begins to change. You start to see a community that simply wanted to live by its own rhythms. Horses moving across the plains, ceremonies rising with the smoke, families gathered by the fire, and a homeland that wasn't meant to be divided by fences or treaties. The battle at the Greasy Grass was not some accidental clash in the wilderness. It was the result of years of broken promises, pressure, intrusion, and a steady tightening of the world around them. Yes, it was a victory. But it was also the beginning of decades of loss, confinement, and grief. That little ticking object Black Elk took from a soldier's belt, the watch feels like a symbol. In the American West, time was often measured by cavalry raids, treaties signed and violated, and new lines drawn on maps. But for the Lakota and their allies, time was measured in buffalo migrations, winter stories, visions, songs, and memories shared long into the night, memories like this one. So here's the real question for us now. If we finally listen to the voices that were actually there, children like Black Elk, warriors, mothers singing from the hills, how does it change the story we thought we knew about America? If you want to keep exploring the side of history that textbooks flatten or ignore, stay with us here at Native Legends Uncovered. You can subscribe if you'd like. But more importantly, share this story. Talk about it. Let it challenge the way you see the past. Because some legends aren't myths at all. They're memories waiting for someone to finally hear them.